So hello there, guys, and welcome to GDPR for Funnel Builders. I'm with Adam Helman from YourScope Consulting. Adam, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. A bit warm, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, it's a hot one today.
Hottest April since 1949, apparently.
Yeah. Well, when they say like, oh, it's the warmest day of the year, it's not that difficult because it's April. But so that's good to know. All right. Okay, guys, just while we get this kind of ready, because we are broadcasting on Facebook at the same time. Hey, Paul, how are you doing? Hey, Annalyn, how's it going? Mark, fantastic. I'm glad you guys are with us. I'm going to click share a couple of times. So I'm going to share across a few different places because I want to make sure that we're posting this out to as many places as possible. So where's our GDPR one? There we are, GDPR. We are live. And you guys should be able to share this out as well. If you can click share, it'd be really good. Just get a few eyes. Hey, Dan. Glad Dan the Freedman's joined us here. That's fantastic. I'm going to share this on my own personal timeline as well. Share on your timeline. GDPR for funnel builders. Apparently there was another GDPR call. Were you on that, Adam, as well today?
Yeah, I did step in for a bit.
That's
I
hilarious.
did have a little look.
We all love it, don't we? GDPR for funnel builders and marketers. Okay, guys, I think we're going to jump in. So hopefully this will only take... Oh, hey. How's it going, guys? Oh, fantastic. Beautiful day here by the sea. Awesome. Hey, Chris. How's it going? Hey, Talk Guild. Basically, I wanted some free consulting. And Adam, we were at WordCamp last week, WordCamp London, yeah? And we mentioned a couple of calls we've been on about GDPR. I obviously run a UK business, but we've got a lot of customers in the US and the EU. And it seemed like, frankly, it was becoming a bit murky. And you basically said it's actually not nearly as complicated as people are making it out to be. So really, this is just kind of a conversation about how this works, how this is going to help. I'm going to keep an eye on the Facebook comments. I've got a bunch of questions lined up. We've already had people ask questions in the group and on the event, and I've had people send them in. So if you have questions, guys, just write them in the comments and we'll try to get to them. But in the meantime, why don't you just start by framing kind of who you are and where you are with GDPR, Adam?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm trying to get my own web design agency properly off the ground, but I have a day job, which is slowing things down. And that day job, certainly for the last 12 months, has been very much around GDPR. I'm a technical project manager. I've got a strong development background. I've been in IT since Moses. It feels like that at times. That's why I've got grey hair and nothing up here.
Yeah.
And so even myself, prior to 12 months ago, I didn't really know. I hadn't even heard of GDPR, to be honest. And then it started to appear. And so my services as a freelance project manager kind of took off. And I've worked for a number of organisations. I'm currently doing stuff for TUI, who are huge, helping them with their GDPR program.
Wow.
So it's definitely a hot potato at the moment. It's definitely, and I think the nearer to 25th of May that we get, it's panicking people. And there's an element of people being right to be panicked, for definite. But it's also about trying to pigeonhole things properly and not get over concerned with it. The reality is most organizations are not going to be ready on the 25th of May, and the regulators are almost certainly going to go after your Facebooks and your Googles, or at least make sure. So those guys are panicking because it's going to cost them a huge amount of money if they're fined. For us, and I use us in the loosest possible sense, depending on the scale of different businesses that are on this call, most of us are the small to medium bracket, and we're not really going to be targeted. But that said, the ICO, who are the regulators in the UK, have committed to investigating 100% of complaints. So the main reason the ICO are probably going to knock on your door is because you've done something. You keep emailing somebody after they've opted out, for example, so you've been complained about.
Yep.
Or to be honest, just really dodgy, underhand, nasty competitor actions where they just, Mike Killen really pisses me off, so I'm going to report him to the ICO, and they'll then investigate you even if they, find nothing there. So,
okay,
you need to take it. You need to put it into perspective, but you do need to get ready for it.
Yeah. So this kind of, let's look at this, because I know there's a few things that you want to talk about, and there's a few questions you've already seen in the group that you've kind of lined up. The main thing for me, and this is particularly from a funnel building perspective, is a huge part of our business relies on lead magnets. Mm-hmm. So someone enters their email address, maybe their name as well. We send them a PDF or a worksheet or whatever it is, or maybe they sign up to a webinar. And then from that, they're added onto my main newsletter list, and I send them one email a week and a couple of promotional emails, maybe. And there's some automation follow-up saying, hey, if you like this lead magnet, maybe you'll like this product, that the two are maybe linked. That process there, to me, I haven't had a firm answer. I think we should preface this by saying you're not a lawyer or anything. You're not a solicitor.
Yeah, I think, you know what, lead magnets and marketing and direct marketing, all of that is still more than doable, but there are a few hoops that you may or may not need to jump through. So yeah, maybe if I just, for those that are also, I'm guessing most people have heard of GDPR and have a pretty good idea, but I was thinking maybe a very quick 5-minute
great
key points of it. I'm happy. I won't stop. Well, I will just do that and get it out there. And then if that causes questions, then absolutely fine. So yes, I'm not a lawyer. It is advisable that you seek legal advice simply because every business is slightly different. And so what I may say, you may take on board, but it doesn't actually quite fit. So by all means, take it and run with it, but then you really kind of want someone to give it a bit of a rubber stamp. So GDPR, 25th of May, it's been around since April 2016, that's when the regulation was approved, and we've all had 2 years apparently to get ready. And that ends on the 25th of May. So 25th of May, it's enforceable. And it is law. It doesn't need anything else passed. It's law. And each member state of the EU has its own regulators. In the UK, so that's all I'm really familiar with, is the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. Lots of different ones all around Europe. The other key thing is it basically applies to European or EU living individuals. Wherever that data is stored in the world, it is still applicable. So if you're storing stuff in the US, or you are in the US selling goods to the EU, you have to comply. And so I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but we'll come back to that. It's not set and forget. You get it all sorted and do it all now, great, but it does need review. There are things that will change. There are third parties that will come and go in your business. Might not need a great deal of change, but it does need a regular review. And it's a business issue. It's not an IT issue. It is a business issue. It's IT might be a fairly large chunk of that, but it's a business issue. It's all about the business processes and IT processes that you have in place that handle that data. So and that includes hard copy as well. So if you're scribbling down phone numbers in an address book, that's got to be adequately protected, and so on and so forth. So it's the whole thing. From a website point of view, there's only really 3 main areas, but we'll get to that. But it can go much wider, and it's not just EU individuals per se. It's not just customers. It includes employees too. So, if you've got people working for you and they're EU citizens, then you have to treat their data. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you have to worry about with them, which I'm not going to get into here. So the focus tends to be on customers, but HR is also majorly impacted. In brief, GDPR and something called the EPR, which is...
Yes, now already, first of all, the employees thing, you're the first person to have mentioned that. Makes complete sense. I have not heard anyone mention that. So that's secondly, when we had a brief catch up beforehand, EPR, and I was like, brilliant. What's that?
EPR, EPR and GDPR I'll do it the other way around. GDPR and EPR replace the Data Protection Act and the PECR, respectively. So the PECR came in 2002 and is the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation, and that's what most people know about with cookies. That stuff is cookies, basically. And the EPR is replacing that. So that's also about cookies, but goes a bit wider. I'm not a massive expert yet on EPR. It's still in draft as far as I know, but it was supposed to go live with GDPR on the 25th of May. So the whole cookie thing, it's worth getting ready for because it is coming, but the rules aren't clear yet or aren't set. But we'll touch on that, I'm sure, a little bit later as well.
Great.
And on the HR thing, just while I remember, because one thing that people aren't sure about, this includes things like if you're interviewing people. If you've interviewed people for a job and they haven't got the job, you've got to do something with their data still. You know, you're not allowed to just hang on to it. Okay, so just
so when you apply for a job, not that many of us guys have jobs, when you apply for a job and they go, oh, we'll keep your records on file just in case, we, Sebastian, I'll go, actually, I don't want that. Unless
they've agreed to it. But there are also some very dodgy things in employment contracts about when you actually sign the contract for the job. You know, there'll normally be some clauses in there that say that, you know, you agree to give us the right to do this, do that, sell your firstborn, whatever it might be. And who's not going to sign it? All right, it's a job offer, basically. Yep. It's you know, no one's going. So that's all going to change because that's not fair. So,
great.
Right. So, personal information, personally identifiable information, or PII, another acronym just to chuck out there, is literally. Oh, great. Sorry about the noise. If you can hear it, I've got some guy with some like chopper.
No, we can't hear.
Oh, great. Oh, well, he hasn't revved it yet. Okay. It's basically anything that can be used to identify an individual. All right, that's photographs, IP address, name, email address, social security number, national insurance number, video, CCTV footage, anything that can be used to potentially identify a specific individual is covered, basically. And there's a great big long list if you go on the ICO website.
Interesting.
Great big long list. For us, for the most part, it's going to be just worrying about email addresses and names and addresses and things like that. However, if you're a photographer and you've got a photographic website and you're publishing pictures of your clients, you know, they need to have consented to that. So that's what that is. The other key thing is that most people didn't know about, and to be honest, I didn't know about till about 2 months ago, which is every controller and processor. And by controller, a data controller is somebody that collects the data and basically decides how it's going to be secured. So we're all controllers because we're collecting data and we're either storing it in our WordPress database or wherever. We may be sharing it, but that's something that's something slightly different. And a data processor is a person or organization that does something with it. So MailChimp, ActiveCampaign. If Adam Helman's on Better Proposals, for example. So. So those terms are often bandied about, and the other one is data subject, which is just basically the individual. Now, data controllers and data processors actually have to register with the ICO or whichever member state you're in. So I only did this about 3 weeks ago myself. I know it's not in yet, but that's still applicable under the existing Data Protection Act, I believe. And it varies. The price varies. It's about 40 quid a year. So big sigh of relief for most people. But it does go up to nearly £3,000 a year. So that's obviously for the...
So potentially anyone on this call who collects email addresses, builds funnels, whatever, if they're based in the UK,
you've got to tell the ICO who you are, what you do, why you're doing it. Right. Okay. So it's not that difficult, and it's actually quite easy to do. And you can, if you go registering with the ICO, it's all done online, and then you get a certificate to actually say you are registered. So definitely check that out. And then the last couple of things, sharing data or data transfers is quite big in GDPR, and there are two parts to that. And I'm not talking about it covers things like MailChimp and ActiveCampaign, but basically if the data crosses a border, country border, There are rules surrounding that. Now, to date, there are only 11 countries in the world that the European Commission have approved that those countries have standards in place that are in line with GDPR, and therefore you've got no problem dealing with them. I'll shout them out very quickly.
Yep.
There's 10 of them, and none of them will be, or very few of them will be, any that you would have thought.
Is Estonia on there?
No.
Is it not?
No.
That surprises me.
Andorra, Argentina, the Faroe Islands, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Israel, Jersey, New Zealand, Switzerland, and Uruguay.
Interesting that a lot of those are to do with quite big financial tech companies as well.
Quite possibly.
Interesting.
So the US is obviously a big one, not on the list.
Yeah.
I believe.
Are you telling me that Russia and North Korea aren't on that list, Adam?
No, no surprise. And you would expect them to comply, wouldn't you?
Straight away.
No problem. Yeah, easy.
Unbelievable.
But yes, staggered. So the US, I literally had this call just before this one at 12:30, and the lady on that is a lawyer, and that was a question I asked because up until literally a few days ago, I was told that the US, who were relying on something called Privacy Shield, prior to that was something called Safe Harbor, which was utterly rubbish, and then that got beefed up into Privacy Shield. So if companies in the US are covered or certified and protected by Privacy Shield, that still wasn't considered adequate enough for GDPR compliance, and that was being actively looked at. I've now been told, so again, I'm not saying this is definitely the case, but my understanding is that's actually now been confirmed as being adequate, but it's still not been ticked off yet because currently Ireland are challenging it.
Interesting.
Okay. And I can't remember the name, it's a CIFL or something. There's the supervising authority in Ireland, are quite big deals because an awful lot of big tech companies like Dropbox and whatnot use Ireland as a data processing storage place.
Of course.
So they've got quite a lot of influence, Ireland, over compared to the rest of the EU. So they're not happy about Privacy Shield. So for those, so Australia, all of that, none of that is compliant.
Okay.
So the ways around that, all right, just as a, I'll try and make it simple. Ways around that are you make your own assessment as to the adequacy. Right, there is some latitude by the ICO for you to sort of go, yeah, you know what, they're a big company, they probably know what they're doing. You probably want a little bit more meat on the bones than that, but you do have some latitude to make your own assessment. The other alternative is that you actually, when dealing with companies in those countries, you actually just have your agreement under its own contract that has the GDPR compliance clauses in there.
Okay.
Come on to that a little bit later, given one of the questions that I think Paul asked in the group earlier.
Yeah.
And that will apply to any country not listed. But the US is further along. Privacy Shield is pretty close. So you shouldn't really have anything to worry about there, but it's just to mention it. So that's sharing data across borders. The other thing is, and again, maybe we're not all big enough, but if you're quite a big company and you've got offices around the world, sharing data with your own organization, but across border is something different. And that's something that you use, and I'm just going to say this legal term once because we're trying to avoid all that. It's something called binding corporate rules. And just so that people are aware of it, you basically can do it, but you need to actually fill in a special form on the ICO and register those rules with them. And they'll okay it or they won't, and then you probably can forget about it. So it's just there's a thing there. And the very last thing before we get to the Q&A is the penalties. So that's the other thing that's panicked a lot of people. Compared to the Data Protection Act, which I think does about €500,000 as a maximum fine. It's 20 million euros maximum fine for each serious offence, or 4% of your annual global turnover, whichever is the greater. You know, so someone like Facebook, you know, they could be fined up to 100 billion pounds euros as a fine, which is quite painful. So it's got a lot more teeth. It's got a lot more. It's all good for us as individuals. It's a long time coming, but it's a pain in the bum for businesses to get done. But it could give you things like competitive edge and all sorts of things just by showing you care. Ultimately. All right. So that was it. That was just the very.
So the big takeaway for me there is that this is actually about the individual as data, not what the businesses can and can't do, if that makes sense.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's driven by the individual now, whereas before it was companies saying what you have to do. It's the other way around now. Now it's I'm the individual. I own the data. I have the right to the data. I have the right to tell you what to do, and you will do it, or you will get what's coming to you.
Yeah. So Jamie, I hope that answers your question, because Jamie says, does this apply to European businesses or also North American ones, or does it have to do with the nationality of your customers? It's the nationality of your customers.
It's just that, so where you are as a business is irrelevant.
Yep.
It's who the individuals are, and if they're in the EU. So if you're, if I'm selling services to the US, I don't actually need to comply with GDPR because the individual in the US doesn't have that safeguard. But the other way around, and one of the big questions that people say, well, how is anyone going to enforce that? How is the UK?
That's one of Paul's questions.
Right. How is the UK gonna do that? Well, it's quite interesting, and I guess time will tell if it actually happens. But what I've been led to believe is there are various international agreements and treaties already in place that deal with things like US citizens who are in the UK who commit a crime in the UK can be prosecuted by the UK under that agreement with the US. And all the various different countries all have those kind of agreements, and it would be under that, is my understanding, and it would be totally within that remit.
Yep. Okay, let's get into some practicalities. That was really useful. To me, that's far more useful, because I now think, well, I want to take not that I was sort of like writing down people's lists and just sort of leaving them on trains like a lot of politicians do, but I kind of look at it's about the individual and what their rights are. Interesting. Another point Torquil brought up about testimonials. Of course, that's publicly identifiable data, right?
It depends. Depends what you put on there. If it was me and you just said Adam H. London. That's not enough to identify me as an individual. But if you said, Adam H, YourScope Consulting, you could probably,
phone number, blood type, address.
Unless Adam Hempy worked for me as well in YourScope Consulting, that would be fine. But if they can be identified, and there are techniques called things like anonymization and pseudonymization, which are often bandied about. So. Even things like some analytical data, if it's being lumped together, so profiling data like they haven't got my name or my address, but they've taken the fact that I'm male, in my 50s, live in London, and I'm used to help fill up a demographic in terms of analytics data. That's perfectly acceptable, because you can't determine it's me personally.
Yeah. Okay. So the big one, and this is, you mentioned it. I sent it over. A bunch of people asked me. It's in the group. This is about third party. You mentioned that you had.
Okay. Let's do that one first, then, because that's probably the most complicated. All right. Yeah. I've just written myself a few bullet points here so I don't forget. The first one certainly was something like, I think that you'd asked Mike as well, like, will ActiveCampaign or MailChimp, etc., be GDPR compliant, and can I get?
Shall I read out what has been sent in as well?
I've got Paul's one down here as well.
That's great. That's pretty much the sum of it.
These are all kind of related. So, but also, what kind of? I thought I turned that off. Excuse me.
It's all right. We'll just power through. That's all right.
What kind of worker agreement do we as funnel builders need with customer and maybe third parties like MailChimp and ActiveCampaign? And related to that was about using an email service called Campaign Monitor. Right, the fact that you're a funnel builder is irrelevant. Okay, it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as somewhere, and we'll get to that, things like privacy policies and things like that. You say what you're going to do with any data that you use, and if you're going to use data in different ways, you need to people need to opt in for different things. You can't lump it all together. You
Right.
can't just have just opt in to anything I fancy, or just subscribe to all my mailing lists without saying what they are. Or you could list them all. Do you want to opt into my newsletter, my hints and tips, my marketing? And you can't have all that in one opt-in either. It's got to be split out for the most part. Now, one of the things mentioned by this lady lawyer previously was it does depend how risk averse you are. And in some of these things, she herself is not necessarily going to follow the letter of advice. However, she's a lawyer and can probably argue it if it came to it. So my suggestions are more about, when we get to the detail, a little bit more the detail, a bit more about bulletproofing.
Yep.
It's like, this is what you're supposed to do. How likely that's going to be a problem for you or not is something you and another lawyer probably needs to take under advisement. So third parties, right, the ultimate, what you're supposed to have with any third party, is, I touched on it a bit earlier, is actually a contract or an agreement with them.
Yep.
And the big thing that needs to have in it, now whether it's a contract, their contract and you sign it, or yours and they sign it, depends, as long as it's got all the right nice GDPR typey stuff in there. But the biggest thing that it's got to have in there is that they agree to that they are responsible for the data in their care.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, if you don't have that agreement and they get hacked, and all the personal data you sent to them is out on the internet, or the credit cards and whatever it might be, then the ICO will come and investigate you first of all. And if it looks like, well, everyone kind of followed best practice, you can't guarantee you won't get hacked. Mm. But if it looks like that third party was utterly remiss, all right, they were running out of an ice cream van and, in the back streets of, I don't know, Manchester somewhere, and just like, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Then you're the one that's going to be fined, not them.
Yes.
Okay. The responsibility was on you to ensure that anyone you share it with is...
Because I'm the data controller, right?
That's right. And I'm sharing it with those people, and it's my responsibility to make sure, as best I can, and again, it's within reason, all of those terms, that they're going to take care of my data. However, if you've got that agreement and it says their responsibility, if they get hacked, chances are most, not necessarily all, but nearly all, the fine will probably go their way.
Yeah.
So, and the best way to do that is with an agreement. Now, the reality is, not a lot of companies, or unless, I certainly don't have the clout to go to Facebook and say, you know what, your privacy policy next year is all well and good, but I really want you to just confirm that in my case, please look on. Ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's always worth, depending on the third parties, always worth trying to do that. If you're not going to do that, it's still worth at least getting clarification, asking them, emailing them, are they compliant? What does that compliance look like? How are they going to remain compliant? And do they take responsibility of the data I give them? That alone is going to be quite helpful. I'm not saying I've even managed to do that yet.
Well, it's interesting this, because the big takeaway for me, because I actually have emailed ActiveCampaign and said, what am I doing? And they said, actually, we've been pretty compliant more than that for a while now. That's actually down to their Azure servers. So there's some stuff to do with that anyway. But I said, okay, so as far as you guys are aware, you guys are compliant. I believe that you're compliant. We've gone through and they've got a bit of content about that. That's fine. The big thing for me is that there's a lot of things on things like a lot of plugins and software on things like AppSumo, a lot of software launching. And I've looked through some of them. Some of them don't have anything. Some of them have don't even talk about their server protection or anything like this.
No, absolutely.
And
maybe in a garage in their basement.
Yeah, and this is the big thing. We have to understand the reason this is such a big deal is because a lot of us can use software and products out there that actually are run by two guys. They're just college students. They've just created some software out there, but actually there's nothing in there to protect their business.
So look into again. So it's buyer beware.
Yeah.
Now again, things like plugins in general. you know, most plugins, the data is all handled on your own website, or stored in your own website. Okay, so for those, you don't necessarily need to worry too much. It's your host is then on the hook for that. Okay, so having an agreement and checking out how compliant your host is a very valuable or worthwhile exercise too. The other things you can do are if that doesn't pan out and they say, well, no, or we are, you know, do you believe them or not? That's also not necessarily going to be enough. It might be if you're investigated or you're being audited by the ICO. If you can show you've done some reasonable due diligence and you haven't just hoped to be lucky, you know, a lot of that's going to go in your favor quite a bit. Okay, they appreciate you're likely to be quite limited. Other things that you can do is if they say that they are compliant, then try and get some evidence to back that up. Now, in the Azure or AWS space, you know, there are certifications from a security point of view that are available. All right, there are two really. There's ISO 27001, which is a standards certificate. Expensive to get. You know, most of the bigger companies will go through something like that and get certified, and that also gives someone a fairly nice fuzzy feeling because it's all their data security controls and that they've been implemented. The other thing is something, and this is horrible, an SSAE number 16 report. It's not a certificate. It stands for Statement of Standards for Attestation Engagements, number 16. Rolls off the tongue. That's a lot of people just call them SOC reports, SOC for Service Organization Control. And there are two types. One is just a snapshot of a company's controls at a specific point in time, and the other one, which is type 2. These are a bit like diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. I think there is a type 3, but type 2 is more thorough because it was tested by an independent tester over a period of 6 months. So if they can give you a copy of their SOC, or you ask for a SOC report or an ISO 27001 certificate, they're really good to be able to say, well, you know.
And again, I think a lot of this is 99% of us, we're probably using pretty standardized products and services. Paul even says most of them have even got a GDPR page now that you can go to and read up on. Interestingly, Emily said, is there a blacklist of non-compliance apps or plugins? I'm not aware of one.
No idea.
So, you know,
Emily, if you want to start one.
If you want to start one and sell it. So I don't know of one. So there's a lot there that, you know, we can investigate and find out.
It is worth just, sorry, I know I can see
go for it,
The converse of that is that people will be asking you as well.
Sure.
All right. So your customers may be asking you about your compliance. Now and again, you can direct them to your privacy policy, which should cover most of that. And from a customer point of view, that should cover it pretty much. So.
Okay.
Sorry,
that's perfect. That's great. And you know, we talk about IU Bender as a privacy policy generator.
They're all those things are all pretty good. Because I was going to talk a little bit about privacy policy and I'll tell you what. Let me run into that then quickly. So from a WordPress perspective, there are just three things really from the website that need to be in place. Okay, one is a privacy policy. One is a cookie policy. All right, that's more to do with EPR, and so you could argue that that's not essential, although it is with the old PECR regulation. And the opt-in scenario. That's it, pretty much. There's very little else. All right, and where you use those opt-ins, and we'll talk about that, is where it kind of comes in. So the privacy policy. One thing that's worth mentioning is, and it was mentioned at WordCamp actually on one of the talks, was that if you've got a term of services or terms and conditions, that's a contract, okay, and that's actually contractually what the agreement you have with your customers. Don't stick your privacy policy in there. Don't add it as part of your terms and conditions, because then you make it a contract and it will be enforced. Or you could fall foul of it yourself if you're found not to follow your own privacy policy. Whereas privacy policy is, this is what we're going to do, but no one can actually hold you directly accountable for it. So keep it separate. That's just, I believe someone told me that's
okay.
And someone said it on WordCamp. Right, so privacy policy basically is where you're going to outline all the various bits and pieces now. I'm going to, if I can, I'm going to try and share my screen.
Yep.
I'll show you what I've done. I'm not saying mine's perfect. Not yet. It's a work in progress. Let me see if I can share that.
I think, because I hear this a lot, and you say there, it's not perfect. I think a lot of this is, if you're shown to be doing everything within your power, the horrible word of due diligence, it's unlikely that they're going to charge you, whatever it is, 30 million euros. If you're doing everything in your power and kind of just relying on fear, so to speak.
For sure. And the opt-in thing isn't, if someone's complaining about you because you're still emailing them, you're not likely, it's not to say you won't, you're not likely to get a fine. You're certainly not likely to get one that big, all right? They might give you a slap on the wrist, or they might say, get it sorted, we're coming back in 6 months. If you haven't done it, then we're going to fine you. They also have the power, in certain circumstances, to shut your business down. Which people don't know. In a region, it's like, if you continually flout it, you would just be, you would not be allowed to trade in that region. Simple as that. Right. I don't know. Is that visible?
Yes. Perfect. That looks great. Yeah.
Okay. So the big thing with privacy policies is they need to be free of legalese. They need to be easy to read. They need to be state the stuff that needs to be stated for obvious reasons. And it's supposed to be, say, just not, if your website was marketing children, for example, like a Pengu type website, then they even state that your privacy policy should be easy enough to be read by the children that visit the site. So it's important. Okay, so I'm not going to bang on too much about this, but to make this quite easy, I've just done it in an accordion thing. It makes it look a lot less
intimidating,
horrendous.
And
I'll talk the data protection officer. Well, that's me. All right, because I'm a one-man band, and I've just set up an email address of DPO at my organisation. But you need to say where people who have concerns about privacy, where they can go to exercise any rights or to complain or anything. So you need to make that clear. All right, and all these different sections are basically the things that you kind of need to have it. Now, Bender do this, and they do it in quite a nice graphical way with icons and stuff, and that's fine. Okay, however you want to do it. And I'm quite happy for people if they want to have a look at this and steal this is a template, but you absolutely do have to season it to taste, because it's specific to me. It talks about my company, and whilst we may be doing certain things similarly, there are bits that are specifics that won't apply. So, okay, but if you use it as a basic. So, you've got a little thing there. Who are we? What we do? Blah, blah, blah. Just describing, letting the customer know what definition of personal data is. I'm not expecting you to digest all this, but you'll see how small some of these are. They're not. It's not pages and pages. What do we collect? So again, this is specific to you. This is the stuff that you guys need everything you possibly might collect. So this includes comments people leave on blog posts.
Wow.
All right. This includes anywhere where they might be saying who they are. If they're allowed to leave it anonymously, then, and if you're not sure, stick it in. Okay. Even if you're not actually, if you're unsure, inside leg measurement, whatever it might be. And that's one other point. Again, you should only be collecting data that you can justify having. If you're selling marketing funnels to people in the car industry or whatever it might be, needing to know if them have children, that might be relevant if they're want a people carrier. If it's a baking site or something, there's no relevance, so you'll get tripped up on that. And what do you use it for? So that's the other big thing. You've got to say why you want their data. All right. So some of this is fairly standard woolly stuff, to notify you of this, that, and the other, validate who you are, to personalize your experience. They're all valid things, right? How do we protect it? This is an area I need to flesh out a little bit. It's just like we use SSL, we use the secure hosting, whatever it might be. This one's more interesting for most people. Right, do we disclose any information to outside parties? So anyone that you use, whether it's a plugin or software as a service or ActiveCampaign or whatever it might be, another call out there to Adam. So hopefully your privacy policy.
We've got an almost identical technology stack, Adam.
I probably stole it. I might have, largely, and then seasoned it. But what you mean this bit here?
Yeah, this bit there. Yeah, almost identical.
We should go for a bulk deal. I'm sure we can work.
Yeah.
So obviously Facebook, Google, ActiveCampaign, ConvertFox for me anyway. A better proposal, Stripe, so Zen to pay. Crystal are the people that supply my VPS host. So at the moment, all that kind of stuff. Link, and the thing is to link to their privacy policies. Give people an opportunity to. Yeah. No one's gonna. All right. Yeah. Or some people will, but most people aren't that fussed, right?
Yeah.
What I do with third-party links. The other big thing is. Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, the other thing is how long you keep your data. Yeah. Again, it's taking the minimum amount of data, and then when you don't need it anymore, getting rid of it.
Well, so this brings me on to one of the questions. If someone unsubscribes from my email list, do I have to delete their information from ActiveCampaign, for example?
Depends.
Yeah.
So if someone has unsubscribed and they've unsubscribed from all of your lists,
yep,
and they're not a customer,
yep,
then they need to be deleted.
Okay, I think that's
all right.
Again, this is not that far off what a lot of people should have been doing or have been doing.
For sure, it's a good thing. It's forcing people into a framework and doing the right thing. So if they are a customer, see the other big thing that, or one of the big things, is the reason you've got to have a lawful basis for having that data or asking for that data or using that data. Yeah. There are really only two that will apply to us, the things that we do, and that's either consent. So if they consent for you to have it, job done, or you have legitimate interest. So it's a reasonable thing for business purposes that you should have that data. So if somebody becomes one of your customers, for example, they don't need to opt in to anything. You are required, and it's quite reasonable for you to have something in order to contact them.
Yeah.
About status and follow up and support and all those kind of things. What that doesn't mean though is that you can then add them to your mailing list. That's separate. Okay, that's not the same thing, but it's legitimate for you to store their data because they're a customer. Simple as that. If they're not a customer, then there are arguments about direct marketing being a legitimate interest, and to a degree you can, I think, but for me, playing on the safe side, I want to just get opt-ins. It might mean that a lot of your list, because you do need to people that opted in before GDPR, you do need to go back to them and get them to opt in again.
Into our newsletters?
Onto your mailing lists in particular. Not so much if they're customers and they're not on any mailing list, you don't have to do anything. But if they're on a mailing list, then you really do need to ask them again. Yep. And there are ways of doing that. And I've seen lots of emails coming my way to do things like that. Hi, because GDPR, we take your privacy seriously, blah, 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 blah. But that's not very enticing. So again, from a marketing point of view, you probably do want to try and give them some incentive to do it. Actually, the last call made a really good point. Rather than just having a link to opt in or re-opt in, have a yes and no. Yeah. Because you'll get more yeses if they have to think about it. Mm-hmm. If they know just by ignoring it they're being opted out, they won't opt in. Yeah. So
I mean, it's interesting now because we actually have a data cleaning process anyway on our site, and people have to actively, if they say, I think even you've mentioned, like, I say, look, if you don't want to have my emails anymore, I'll unsubscribe you. Yeah. So we're constantly cleaning that list anyway. It's interesting about the opting back in. So everyone watching this can expect to get 45 trillion emails from me getting you to opt in.
So all right, so that's the privacy. Well, that's the kind of thing that needs to be in a privacy policy. You absolutely have to have one. Okay, you are screwed if you don't. The other one is a cookie policy. Now, this is, I'm using something, there's IU Bender will do one. I'm using something called CookieBot.
Yeah.
And CookieBot fill all this in. This is just effectively a shortcode in my on my website page. So this entire thing is entirely filled up by CookieBot and is updated by them once a month.
Mm-hmm.
They review all the cookies.
That's clever.
All right, and again, a reference to my privacy policy, but they have all this stuff, and people can change. It's saying your current state is allowing all of them, and you can withdraw and change here as well. And they also, I've actually got on my footer, at any point you can click on this, and you'll get the cookie banner come back up, and you can. This is all CookieBot, and you can untick. And see all the things, and it's quite cool. Yeah. Now, I haven't fully implemented it yet because actually, regardless of what they do when they tick those things, it does nothing. All right, apart from the marketing one, the analytical one, because that's quite easy to do with Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics. But this is one of the difficulties with WordPress is you need to go and you need to talk to all the plugins and WordPress itself and find out what all the cookies are that they set. And then you need to update, you need to find that script and add a little attribute to each one, and then CookieBot will deal with it. The trouble is WordPress does an update, plugins do an update, it's all gone. So what WordPress need to do is, and plugin developers, and I think this may be the way it's going, is they need to make it sort of hookable in some way so that it's much more easy for you to do it and only set it once. So,
okay.
The other thing I wanted to show was what a lead magnet needs to look like now then.
Yeah, that'd be good. I think we're going to have to wrap it up shortly.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So last, this is probably the main one. So it's this kind of thing. Okay. And I've set it so that you obviously can't get my free download unless you tick one or more of these boxes. You have to have this little description or something like that again tells them why you're taking their data. The same thing on a contact form. If you want to subscribe them to a mailing list from a contact form, and there needs to be some checkboxes there that say, it's up to you. If you want to also subscribe, please do tick here, and a little bit about a pointer to your privacy policy.
Yep.
So there you go. That was
no, that's good. That's perfect. I think that's one of the big things that comes up is yes, you'll absolutely have to have a checkbox saying, I'd love to give you our checklist, our lead magnet, our infographic, whatever. To get this download, you just have to subscribe to one or more of our mailing lists.
But you need to record it. That's the thing.
Yeah, and things like, for example, we use Opt-in Monster. They've on their GDPR page, they're saying they're going to be doing it. ActiveCampaign also has things like tag managers to say when people add in.
Yeah, I mean, I've set this particular one up so that this lead magnet actually tags, it sends to ActiveCampaign and actually sends the date and time and what things they opted in and sets it all up automatically in.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to skin that cat.
Yeah, and it's interesting as with all change, a lot of people are going, oh God, it's the end of the world. It means I'm going to have no list and no one's going to ever opt in. First of all, it changes both positive and negative. The reality is that people are actually now more likely to opt in to a box, and they've tested this, a box that shows compliance, because they go, these people are taking it seriously. They want to make sure that my data is safe. Yeah, I'm happy to opt into that newsletter. We know that we can unsubscribe at any time. We've actually found that there hasn't been a huge drop-off in opt-ins because people have to check that little box. We've just made sure that the offer is still as compelling. So I don't personally see massive changes, and I think eventually it will just become part of the habit of filling out those boxes anyway.
Yeah.
It's good. Man, this is really good. I really appreciate this. Like I said, it was essentially some free consultation. A couple of little quick comments here. Mark and Dan said that if you originally have a double opt-in, I don't believe that you still need to get them to resubscribe or reconsent. Thoughts on that?
No, double opt-in is irrelevant. To me, double opt-in is all about spam.
Yeah.
And checking out that it's a legitimate email address. So I'm not using double opt-in necessarily on all of those. I'm letting ActiveCampaign tell me that it's a bounce, but there's nothing wrong with using double opt-in. But no, they still have to re-opt-in.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. I don't think there's any other massive ones. We talked a little bit about that. Yeah, here's the big one. This would be a good one to end on. Do I have to be fully compliant by, is it 25th of May?
Technically, yeah. Basically, you've had 2 years to get ready. But it's on the 26th of May. You're unlikely to have your door kicked in. To be honest.
If I do, guys, I'll live stream it because
no. Oh yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and you have to get their consent because that's video footage. No. So you're getting your head kicked in. Yeah. What was I going to say? There was a thing about that. You do need to be. However, if you were not, the door was knocked on 26th of May, if you can show you've been working towards it and you've got a plan, you've done a data audit, you've done some flow mapping, you've started email, then they're probably going to be not so nasty.
No, that's
I guarantee that though.
So. Yeah, exactly. Adam, thank you so much for taking us through that. Some really pragmatic advice that, we like reading about. Thank you for the examples as well. The opt-in example itself, I think you could do an entire video on that because I think people are very confused about that. How can people reach out to you, get in contact with you?
Well, you can either ping me. It depends. I don't know how people can. Obviously, I don't know if they can get to me through your city service thing. I don't know if that's doable.
Yeah.
Obviously, they can email me on my website.
That's adam.helman@yourscope.co.uk.
Yeah. Well, there's a telephone number up the top. Oh, there was. I think I've taken it down now.
Even better.
Yeah.
Awesome. Again, thanks, mate, for coming on. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, mate.
Cheers.
Bye now.
Take care.
Cheers, guys, on Facebook as well. Speak to you later. Bye, guys. Bye.